Welcome to Chapter 15 for Business Math called Sales. This is lesson 15.3, Net Profit. Make sure, as always, read through the chapter, take a look at the lesson, go through the examples, how are they using the formulas, look at the concepts and terminology or vocab in the chapter. It's important to understand what's going on in these problems, not just go through and get a calculation done, but actually understand what's happening because as we move through the chapter, it gets more and more complex. And if you don't understand what's happening, you probably will get to a point where you don't know what to do. So make sure you're paying attention to what's happening in the problem, not just how do I get through it. Okay. And the best way to do that is look through the chapter, pay attention to the examples, and read through the concepts to understand, what it is we're calculating. All right. So that being said, let's read the summary here. So, the markup on the products you sell must cover your operating expenses or overhead. When the markup of an item is greater than its overhead expenses, you make a profit on the item. Calculate the overhead expense and net profit using these formulas. So, we have overhead equals the selling price times the overhead percent, and the net profit equals the markup minus the overhead. So, two pretty basic calculations on this one. It's not going to be terribly crazy calculations here. Let's see. I'm going to flip my page here so I have the right one. So we have the selling price and the cost. So to get the markup, which we figured out on the last section, the markup is just the amount of money over what it costs the company to buy it. So if they're selling for $4.99 and they bought it for $3.69, we just subtract these and that'll tell us our markup. So we're going to do that on each one of these. So you're going to subtract each one to find your markup. And then they give you the overhead percent here. So how much it costs basically to have the item there in stock. So the actual overhead cost is the selling price times this percent. And we'll get an actual cost here for overhead of what it costs to keep this item in stock. And then the net profit is simply the markup, so what it is you're making off the item, minus your overhead. So remember, this is the kind of the profit. This is what they're marking it up more than what they bought it for. So this is what they make off the item. But overhead is the cost of keeping that item in stock. And there's a lot that goes into overhead. So again, reading the chapter, understanding what that means. There's a whole lot of different costs that go into keeping a store running and keeping things in stock. So you subtract these two amounts to get your net profit. All right, I'm not going to do these calculations for you. Those are super duper easy. So I kind of set that up and walked you through the chart there. So Photomart purchased a digital camera for $311.29. The selling price is $499.95. The operating expenses are estimated to be 25% of the selling price. What is the net profit? So, same idea. We need to know the markup. We have our selling price. Sorry, we have our cost and we have our selling price. So we just subtract the two. That'll tell us what the markup is. And then we're going to multiply our selling price, by the overhead percent. So the $499.95 times 25%. That'll tell us what our overhead is. And then we're going to subtract the overhead from the markup we did first. So they're not giving you separate lines to do this on. They only want the end. What is the net profit? They want the end part of the table here, basically. But you still have to do the other pieces in order to get there. Okay. And there should definitely be some work shown along the way here so that we can kind of help guide you and see where or if anything goes wrong, kind of where to direct you. So make sure you're putting your work on your paper. So the second one here, I don't think we need to walk through this one. It's exactly the same as number 7. We have a selling cost. We have, selling price. We have a cost. We have our overhead percentage. So we just need to go through, calculate markup by subtracting, multiplying our selling price and our overhead percent to get our overhead amount. and then subtracting that from the markup so that we know what um, the net profit is for each sheet. All right, let's take a look at the second page here. There we go. Uh-oh, did I not get the second page on here? Or did it get out of order? Uh-oh. What happened? All right, well, I'm going to take a look at the second page, just kind of talking about it. There is a second page, so I apologize that it's not already in the presentation. So number 9 on the second page gives you another table very close to this one, right up here. So you're just going to fill out the table exactly the same way you did this one. It just gives you different pieces. So instead of it being 6 different problems, it's one problem with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different items that you're going to calculate this for. But you're just going to go through and fill it out the same way you did on this first page. Number 10 is the algebra problem. So I'm going to read through it. I'm going to kind of give you a hint as to how to start it here. I apologize that you don't get to see it on the screen, but we'll talk through it here. So City Furniture Company operates on an overhead which is 25% of the selling price. If one of their sleeper sofas costs City Furniture $237.85 and the overhead on the sofa is $174.50, find the selling price, the markup, and the net profit. All right. So that was kind of a lot of information, and I know you can't see that here, so I hope you have your worksheet in front of you so that you could have read along with that. But the main thing is we first want to find the selling price. That's kind of the first easiest thing to find here. So we already have, and if you look up here, so we already know that the overhead of the sofa is $174.50. They told us that in the problem. And overhead equals selling price times the overhead percent. And we know that the overhead percent is 25%. Again, they told us that in the problem. So selling price, we don't know that, times the percent. So this sets you up to be able to find the selling price. Okay, again, this is in the problem. I know you can't see it on my screen, but you should have the paper in front of you so that you can see that. So they gave us the $174.50 for overhead. They gave us the 25% overhead rate or percent. Okay. So we simply just have to divide here by the 25% to get our selling price. So that's definitely an easy calculation there. And that'll tell us how much we're going to sell the sleeper sofa for. The markup, just like we've done before, we're going to subtract the selling price from our cost. And they told us that our cost, this is another piece they gave us, was $237.85. So if we subtract what we're selling it for, which is this calculation here, once we know what S is, and sorry, this is an S, not a 5. Once we know what this piece is, we're just going to subtract it from that cost, at $237.85. That'll tell us what our markup is. And the last piece they want is the net profit, and the net profit is, just like it says up here, markup minus the overhead. So once we have our markup, we're going to subtract it from this $174.50 because we already know what our overhead is. We just need to know what our markup is, which we calculate that in that second step there, right, that I was just talking about. All right, so I know that was a little different. Normally I have it on the screen. For some reason it left that page out when I copied these. So I truly hope that helped, and I will see you in section 4.